Like, God expects a lot of Moses in this passage, I think, because even Moses has a little bit of doubt at this moment. What is up God's sleeve? What is he planning on doing? But God then says the thing that Moses probably should have known, because he had already told Moses that the staff in his hand was the staff of the power of God. God had already given Moses this incredible power that he was holding, symbolized by the staff in his hand. And so God now says, raise your staff and stretch your hand over the sea to divide the water, so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. And I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen. See, this is the second opportunity. We've got an opportunity to encounter God. But secondly, we have an opportunity to do good. God says to Moses, what are you coming at me for? Don't you already know what to do? Now, in Moses' case, I give him a lot of credit, because I wouldn't have thought of just raising my staff and, separating the waters. I wouldn't have thought of that. But maybe, Moses had a closer connection with God than I think I've ever had. And so maybe he should have known better. But the bottom line is that when you and I face a crisis, we often do know better. Sometimes we come up to God and we're like, God, what should I do? Just, drop it from the sky. Tell me what my sign is. And God, I think, sometimes would say, what are you asking me for? Just walk. You know what direction to go. You see, the Bible's very clear on the biggest issues of our lives. And oftentimes we either let the small things become crises, or we, in the big things, forget to think about God. And he basically says, you know what to do, just do good. I find a lot of crisis moments are the biggest opportunities to do the most good. Many of you know, of course, the tragedy of September 11 years back. Thousands of people perished. But thousands more turned their hearts to God, saying, we need to know eternity. Thousands more turned their hearts to volunteering and helping. The number of people who helped people far exceeded the number of people who were lost. You see, good can be done even in the midst of terrible tragedy. And so I want to ask you, if you're in a crisis right now, or if you're coming up to a crisis, the question for you is, what's my opportunity? How can I see God in this moment, and what's the good that I can do? That's the second part of the core principle of mastering change. If you look on the back side of your note sheet, we've got a few more things to do, and so now I want to give you part 3. Every change is a crisis. Every crisis is an opportunity. And part 3, every opportunity is a gift. Let's read the rest of chapter 14 in Exodus. And I think this will become clear. Starting in chapter 14, verse 21. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind, and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He made the wheels of their chariots come off, so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt. Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing toward it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The waters flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. But the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground, with a wall of water on their right and on their left. That day the Lord saved Israel from the hands of the Egyptians, and Israel saw the Egyptians lying dead on the shore. And when the Israelites saw the great power the Lord displayed against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in Moses, his servant. Every opportunity is a gift. And here we see the gifts that God handed to the people of Israel without them deserving it, without them asking for it, without them even trying for it. First of all, God gave them a gift of their freedom. Moses is the one who came into Egypt, and he led them to freedom through the process of the plagues, and God then finally let them get out. He gave them a gift of freedom. That's the first. And I would say that God wants to give you freedom too in your life. No matter what crisis you're facing, no matter what change you're going through, God wants to lead you to a place of greater freedom, greater ability to just you and Him connect. Secondly, God gave them the gift of victory over their enemies. They didn't fight, God did. God took care of it all. And I want to say God wants to do the same thing for you too. He wants you to find your enemies and defeat them. And so the crisis that you're going through today, or the change process that is happening in your life or my life right now, or any time it comes, is because God wants to deal with those things in your life that hold you back. He wants to give you victory. And you can't get victory unless you walk through that crisis. And then finally, God gave them the gift of not going back. I love the fact that God closes the waters up after they get through. He says, now you're done. You're free. Your enemies have been defeated. And the water has closed up. The pathway to return is gone. The change God wants to bring to bear in your life is a change for your freedom, for your victory, and to enable you to live a new life that never has to go back, that never has to return to what it was before. Every change is a crisis. Every crisis is an opportunity, and every opportunity is a gift from God. So what? What does it mean? What's the difference in our lives? Well, you're probably in one of two places today. First of all, you might be in a place today where you're not living life on the edge. You're not right now in a moment of crisis. And so if that's you, I would encourage you to prepare yourself. Prepare yourself to see change as your pathway to future blessing. Because God wants to give you a greater level of freedom, a greater level of victory, and a greater level of being secure that you don't have to turn back. That, my friends, is an awesome gift. God wants to give that to you, and that comes through a process of change in your life. None of us is 100% where we need to be. And so the change is your pathway to greater blessing. But some of you I know